Hi, hello guys, good morning. President Duterte, they arrested President Duterte. I saw this on TikTok. So the former president, well loved, President Duterte, well loved here in the Philippines. God bless, sir, God bless President Duterte. I'm a big fan of President Duterte, okay. And they've arrested, they seem to be hounding President Duterte, right? And they're trying to persecute President Duterte, right? The ex-president, war on drugs, human rights, so that's what they're trying to do. Now, President Duterte is actually, they're trying to take him. I don't know if they've taken him or they did take him. I don't know if they put him on a plane. I managed to see a video on TikTok, and I think they put him on a plane, guys, and they actually took him to the Netherlands, which, the Netherlands, Holland, Amsterdam, and it were quite illegal to do that because they didn't go through the proper procedures. So, I actually do think President Duterte did a very good job here in the Philippines. And as I've actually said, President Duterte is well loved here in the Philippines. I'm just looking for a shady place. You can see what's happening. All this wood, they're going to be making charcoal. So they'll be making charcoal later on. So the guys have been hard at work here to make a little money. So that's it, guys. President Duterte, Rodriguez Duterte, God bless, well loved ex-president here in the Philippines. So, in my opinion, it seems, I don't really know what's going off, but I do know what's going off. And like I said, it seems to be a long time, but you actually are holding President Duterte. And this is the war on drugs. And, you can actually search this. So, all I really want to say is, I watched the war on drugs. I watched the killings. I watched the murders. And a lot of people here in the Philippines are now saying, right, but the drugs are back, the murders are back, the sex crimes are back. The Philippines is not safe anymore. This is the thought of a lot of people here in the Philippines. Before, when President Duterte was actually president, right, a lot of this, the problems actually came down big style. The deaths, the killings, the muggings, the murders, they actually came down, and they didn't stop, but they basically stopped. Because President Duterte declared war on drugs. So, as I've said before, I'm a fan of President Duterte. I think President Duterte did a good job here in the Philippines. But, he's a very smart man. He knows the law, and, it sounds like they're hounding him, and they want to persecute him. So is President Duterte an old fox? A fox is a very smart animal, and hounds are dogs. Dogs in England hunt foxes. So President Duterte is the fox, and whoever's after President Duterte are the hounds. So, like I said, President Duterte, very smart, he knows the law, and, very wise man. So hopefully President Duterte can actually live his life in peace. I'm not going to keep going into it too much, but like I said, I think President Duterte did lots of good things here in the Philippines. And I actually watched President Duterte, chatted before about President Duterte, but he did a lot of good things here in the Philippines. And will they leave President Duterte alone now? You actually made a mistake when you actually played, when you actually come up against President Duterte, because what you didn't realise is you made a mistake, and the mistake was you didn't know the law, and you didn't really know how smart President Duterte was, and what you did was illegal, right? I actually watched it, and it was basically illegal, and you basically kidnapped President Duterte. Now I don't know if you got President Duterte on that plane, and I don't know if President Duterte did actually land in the Netherlands. Now President Duterte had the right to be here. Very funny. There's some funny guys, right? So so here in the Philippines, President Duterte had the right, right? So President Duterte had the right. Right, so President Duterte had the right. This guy here, right, what's showing off walking on here, right? So that guy there, actually, big shot. The guy that owns this land actually caught that guy. These two show-offs. They caught this guy here, what shows off, and they caught him up this tree. And he was pinching all the mangoes. So that guy there were actually pinching all the the one that's screaming like a girl. So the one there was screaming like a girl, right, sissy, they caught him up this tree. If it's the same guy, it looks like the same guy. And he had a bag of mangoes, and the guy saw him from across there, and he speeded around on his motorbike, and he caught the guy up the tree, and he got about 3 carrier bags full of golden mangoes, which he were actually selling. So the guy took the mangoes off him. So in the province, you do get quite a few guys that show off, right? And there is quite a few thieves here as well, but they do pay for it, because if you actually do get caught here, they will actually take the mangoes off you, and it's quite possible you might just get a slap. Let these kids pass, but I'll keep chatting. So that's what I think with President Duterte. You made a mistake with President Duterte. And that was a mistake, really, that was a mistake. Hello! So, just kids passing. Hello! Good afternoon! So, that's just kids. Like I said, a lot of nice people here in the Philippines. 1 or 2 show-offs, 1 or 2 big shots. So, that's it with President Duterte. You didn't go through the proper channels with President Duterte. And I don't know if it's all ended now. I don't know if it's still going off. Right, I know this guy's coming into this wood to chop. I actually always go into this wood. I actually do know the guy that owns the wood. Quite a nice guy who owns this land. So, that's President Duterte. I hope I didn't get lost with the loudmouth. You can see that guy has got a problem. He has to show off and that, the big man. But you do come up against these people in the Philippines, no problem. So President Duterte, God bless sir, and big mistake trying to arrest him, because President Duterte had the right to pick a court, right? He had the right as an ex-president to pick a court here in the Philippines. But, that were basically kidnapping President Duterte, that were kidnap, forcing him to another country to be tried, right, to be tried by another court, right, another court. And that's where you went wrong. So now, I don't know what's happening with President Duterte. Very hot now. Right. So, I'll walk on to the house. Maybe I'll get a cup of coffee and something to eat. So, guys, President Duterte, God bless. Now, war on drugs. You know, I've seen a lot of comments, a few comments, you know, the drugs are back, the killings are back, you know, you've got your fools back. So, hopefully the Philippines, you know, is the Philippines safe? It was a lot safer when President Duterte was at rule. So in President Duterte's reign, it were a lot safer. Now these dogs here, I know they're quite dangerous. And they're followed, because I know the dogs are quite dangerous, these dogs. I'm sure it's these dogs. They come from there. I could be wrong, but it looks like it's those dogs. Very, very careful with dogs here, guys. You know, them dogs might be okay, but be very, very careful here in the Philippines with dogs. So that's President Duterte. It's very hot now, and hopefully I got my point across. You know, like I said, he's well loved, President Duterte. And big mistake. You did not go through the proper procedure, so that's breaking the law. You may be the law here in the Philippines, but you don't have the right to break the law. And because you broke the law, as far as I know, you cannot actually try President Duterte anymore, right? Why? Because you broke the law. And for me, that case now should be thrown out of court. Just looking where them dogs are. Right, guys. Very hot here in the Philippines. Hopefully we can get to mercy. Please like, please subscribe. Please help supporting the way of a dollar. You might not know, guys, but I'm actually stuck in the Philippines now. So I'm actually stuck in the Philippines. I haven't paid my immigration for over a year, and hopefully I can sort this problem out. As I've said, you know, big problem, but hopefully I can sort this problem out, because I'm now here illegally. So I'm here illegally now, guys, which I don't mean to be, and I'm trying to sort my immigration out. Have I been to immigration? No. I'm trying to get in touch with the British consulate. Will I actually be put in a detention centre here in the Philippines? A prison? It's quite possible. Have a great day. Take care. God bless. President Duterte. Have a wonderful life, sir. Have a great time. Like I said, I think the case now against President Duterte, but I don't know. This is the Philippines. Should be thrown out. Should be thrown out to the courts. And President Duterte should be left alone. Right. That's my view on President Duterte. An ex-president that did a lot of good for the Philippines. Have a wonderful day. Here from Concilian.